Hey everyone, back tuning into today's first video. We're going to have a look at the late winter period for this first update, and then later on I'll have the first spring update when we'll have a look at all the long range seasonal models of ones we can get together anyway. Have a look and see what they're showing for the spring of 2015. This one is dealing with late winter because from winter to spring it's quite a transitional period, and it does encompass that sort of cold late winter period until we move off in towards the spring. So we're going to look at January to March, late winter, through this period. In the final Gavs Weather's winter forecast, there was always the suggestion that we'd have probably a relatively mild start to the winter, and then things would get colder later on in the winter. There was always that signal from the seasonal models there, and eventually Gavs Weather's winter forecast did go for that sort of idea as well, that February could be the month to deliver some cold conditions. We'll have a look and see whether that idea is still at play in some of the long range models today. But before I get on with that, I just want to talk about the ads. There's links to articles on most of the pages at gavsweathers.com, so have a browse through the widgets if there's any articles that you're interested in. Just click through those articles and you'll be helping to support gavsweathers.com. Thanks very much for doing that. There's yellow contextual weather-related ads on most pages as well, so have a look at those and click through those if there's anything that you're interested in. Just generally click the ads if you're interested in anything that you see. Thanks so much for getting involved, and thanks for doing that. Now, I'm not going to have a look at every single model that we could look at for this update, because I want to whiz through it quite quickly and then get on to the spring update, which you'll be able to see this afternoon. So let's get on with it, and this is the Russian model first of all. These are probability maps, and this is temperature probability first of all. We see that the Russian model for January to March is going for near normal temperatures across the British Isles. Most of Europe as well coming out near normal. Now, around the coast it is warm. That's because the sea surface temperature anomalies are still quite warm after very warm weather at February 2014. But overall, I think we are seeing a cooler signal there for January to March from the Russian model compared to December to February in last month's update. So there's been a reduction in the temperature, and if we have a look at the precipitation anomaly, we can see why that's happened. And the overall idea is that, again, rainfall anomalies are coming out near normal, but notice all this yellow in the central part of the Atlantic. That is drier than average, below average probability for rainfall in the central Atlantic. So probably got some sort of high pressure in the middle of the Atlantic and mid-Atlantic ridge. Notice all this green down to the south of the country, so the North Atlantic Oscillation has been hinted at to be negative there, with high pressure to the north and possibly over towards Scandinavia as well. So that's the reason for that reduction in temperature. Now, it's a weak signal. It's not necessarily going for a cold January to March period, but it's certainly seeing a cooler period late winter compared to the December to February update that we had last month. Hugo van der Doel next, and throughout the autumn when I've been doing the winter update, Hugo has been seeing a colder than average winter anomaly setting up anyway in terms of the 500 millibar height anomaly, an anomaly that would deliver a cold winter to most of Europe, probably the British Isles included. Now, what Hugo does is a little bit different. It's not a model really, it's an analog based forecast. So Hugo takes the sea surface temperature anomalies across the globe and then based on those sea surface temperature anomalies creates a forecast going forward based on what happened in past years with a similar sea surface temperature anomaly. This was generated in November. So for January to March, the late winter period, Hugo is seeing, again, as he has throughout the autumn, as we're doing the winter updates, he's seeing this area of above average heights, high pressure sitting to the north around Greenland, low pressure going through the central Atlantic, so North Atlantic Oscillation is negative essentially, and a cold air is being pulled down from the North Pole in towards the mid-latitudes of Europe, something like that, and also a cold winter being signalled there on the eastern side of the United States. Have a look at the temperature anomaly, and that backs it up really. A cold winter being indicated for most of America and for most of Europe as well. Now, the British Isles is in between. We're in sort of average temperature anomalies here, and that's just indicative of whether the cold weather to the east has the final say on this, or whether Atlantic origin air has the final say. our final say. Where we are in this part of the world, sitting on the edge of Europe between the cold landmass and the warm ocean, we are always in between the cold and the warm, so we're always in that sort of battleground type situation. Nevertheless, with so much cold being signalled to be there across many parts of Europe, I think we would at the very least be looking at some pretty cold interludes. Whether we actually come out cold on average, I'm not sure, but certainly for January to March, with those sort of temperature anomalies, we would be looking at some significantly cold periods. The precipitation anomaly just backs it all up, really. All these greens through the central Atlantic going into Spain and Portugal is low pressure on a southerly track. We've got the yellows above it through the northern Atlantic, going to the north of Scotland and also around Scandinavia. So just signalling that there's plenty of blocking being signalled in the northern latitudes to the north of the country. The northern latitude oscillation is negative. You would expect to get at the very least some significant cold periods coming through. So no change from Hu Vanderdoel, the American forecaster under the umbrella of NOAA, is still seeing this cold winter and a cold late winter period for most parts of Europe and America. Now the UK Met Office next, and you'll remember that throughout the winter updates that we did in the autumn, the UK Met was consistently seeing a milder than average winter with horrendous sort of troughs of low pressure to the north of the country and really strong zonal westerlies. Still going for Atlantic dominated conditions for January to March, but the sea level pressure anomaly is a little bit different this time. The trough is actually being centred further south. The low pressure is running actually through the country with bits, and there's a little bit of yellow just appearing somewhere around Norway, maybe a little bit of high pressure. So instead of the trough being centred around Iceland as it has been doing on the updates, for this one, for the late winter period, it's been trending southwards. The UK Met is seeing the chance that we could at least get some colder interludes coming through as we get into the latter part of the winter. The temperature anomaly is still above average overall. You expect it with an Atlantic-driven pattern. It is Atlantic-driven, just the trough has been pushed further south. So, yeah, we're coming out around or a little bit above average. Not a hugely warm winter, not exceptionally warm as we would be if it was in these red colours to the north, but above average, and you would expect that for the late winter period on that sort of anomaly. The rainfall anomaly comes out wetter than average, obviously, because we bring the jet stream more or less through the country, or a little bit to the south, and we've got a mean trough of low pressure sitting over the country. So you'd expect a wetter than average period from January to March, and that's what we come away with. Nevertheless, this is a bit of a change, and from the southward movement of this trough, you would expect at least some colder interludes to be coming through at times. So a little bit of a change there from the UK Met Office. The CFSV2 next, and this is the 700 millibar high anomaly for January to March. We're seeing a trough of low pressure right over top of the country, so very similar actually to the UK Met. The jet stream coming through something like that, so more or less on the coolish side of the jet. Although we've got this ridge off Spain and Portugal back into the Azores, and that's not great to turn it cold. You want to get rid of that when you're sending off towards Bermuda to get real cold. Nevertheless, the trough is trending southwards there. Similar to the UK Met, we could get some colder interludes coming through at times. The temperature anomaly for January to March, quite interestingly, is coming out about average, but warmth is in the east and the southeast of Europe. Now, this is cooler, or this would be cooler than we've had it through most of 2014, which has been an exceptionally warm year. So not cold particularly for January to March, but certainly cooler than we've been used to. There would be some cold interludes coming through. The rainfall anomaly is coming out above average generally, particularly through France. I think that is probably indicative. It's telling us that the stream is going through something like that, running to the south of the country. Notice these driving average anomalies up around 9. That's high pressure, or it could be high pressure up around Scandinavia, and possibly also being hinted at to be around Iceland as well, and maybe reaching a little bit on that. But overall, I think the jet stream is going a little bit south on that sort of anomaly, just allowing for some cold snaps at times. This is the 700 millibar high anomaly for January, and it's very westerly really. We've got the trough of low pressure to the northwest of the country, this ridge down around the Azores. The jet stream is coming through like that, a little bit to the south, but overall that's relatively westerly and not overly cold. But have a look at February. It's different for February, so still this idea in play, but as we get through to the late winter through February, we have the chance of changing the pattern, and you notice we've got the trough then centred right over the country, maybe even going a little bit to the east of the country. We've got ridging through the central part of the Atlantic, going up towards Greenland as well, and because of that you would start probably to entrench colder air into this trough, something like that. So that is still going for a colder pattern as we get through to February. The CFS-V2 is still has that idea churning away. That late winter is our best chance of turning the pattern colder. You see this on the temperature anomaly for January. The warmth is backing into Western Europe. The British Isles is coming out around average, but the warmth is backing into the west of Europe. But look how things change for February. The warmth is shunted off to the east. It's actually a little bit colder than average across Ireland and Scotland. Also across Scandinavia, also across Ireland. Something's definitely going on there. It's definitely being turned cold. We're putting colder air into the northwest of Europe as we get through into February. So still the CFS-V2 has that idea that late winter is our best shot at getting some colder conditions, maybe even changing the pattern into one that's properly cold. The JMA from Japan also has this idea. Now this is a 500 millibar high anomaly, I should say, for January. You see that for January it's going for this trough of low pressure to be over a little bit to the west of the country, very similar to the UK Met and to the CFS in the position of that. It means that the temperature anomaly comes out ever so slightly above average on the warmer side of averages. There would be the chance of some cold snaps coming through, but not an overly cold month. The wind arrows are coming generally from a westerly direction there. Not sure if you make that out, but they are. And the rainfall anomaly comes out a little bit wetter than average. But as we get through to February, what happens in February? Look at this. We see that the trough is being shunted off over and to the east of the country. There we are. It's over here across Scandinavia and Central Europe, and still some degree over the country. You can't see the northern latitudes on this, but I can tell you that there's a ridge being signalled to be sitting somewhere over the North Pole, and that will be starting to entrench colder air into that trough of low pressure. So the temperature anomaly for February, look at that, comes out colder than average. The mean wind direction, the wind arrows indicating that we're turning the winds into the north, so we're pulling down colder air into that trough. And the rainfall anomaly still comes out a little bit wetter than average, and of course with a colder month there's the potential there for snow to be coming through. We move through into March finally with the JMA, and things revert to a more typical pattern for March, so things should start to warm up as we get through into March. We have the ridge of high pressure then in the central part of the Atlantic with below average heights out to the northwest, the jet stream running over or maybe a little bit north of the country like that. So consequently the temperature anomaly is coming up for March, turning a little bit milder than average. The mean wind arrow direction shows that we're bringing westerlies back in across the Atlantic, and the rainfall anomaly turning a little bit drier, and that's with the jet stream being shoved off a little bit further north. So still from the JMA, that idea that February could be our month that delivers some colder conditions. Beijing Climate Centre next has been swinging around a lot. This is the 500 millibar height anomaly for January to March, and we can see that the anomaly is quite messy. We've got a trough of low pressure there around Iceland, bit of a ridge on the western side of Greenland, and then this area of above average heights to the south of the country. That's very bad news if you want a cold late winter period, because the jet stream is going to the north, something like that. But the Beijing Climate Centre is changing around hugely. Oh, and by the way, there's also a ridge of high pressure sitting to the northeast around Scandinavia. The Beijing Climate Centre is swinging around a lot from month to month, but overall for January to March on this particular update, that is a fairly mild looking signal. It's very different to most of the other charts that we've been looking at, I have to say. So the temperature anomaly is coming out around or a little bit above average, a milder than average late winter period being seen there by the BCC, and the precipitation anomaly drier than average in the south, a little bit wetter than average in the north. But that's a different one. It's a different pattern compared to what we've been looking at on most of these other models. Finally, Jamstec IOD. We can't look at late winter for this. It doesn't do it doesn't do those sort of late winter predictions. It's seasonal, so we've either got December and February, or we've got March to May. So this is the final update from the Jamstec IOD for the winter, covering December to February, and it still is seeing a cold average month, cold average winter. In fact, it's trended colder compared to last month. Last month it was borderline cold, virtually round average, or a little bit above maybe even. But this month it's definitely gone cold and average again, gone for a cold and average winter, as it has for most of Eastern Europe as well. The reason why it's done that, why it's going for a cold winter, and these are a little bit different by the way, these colours have been enhanced, so it's easier to make out what they're showing. The reason it's gone colder on this final update is that it's going for a lot of high pressure up to the north and the northwest, like blocking around Greenland, low pressure to the south of the country, and yeah, we'd be opening the floodgates at times to the north, possibly even to the northeast with that one. So the Jamstec has trended colder for winter on its final update. Now, it's not a clear total signal across all the models that we've looked at. We've got the BCC still sort of swinging about, and it's gone milder this month. But overall, I think there's still that signal in play here that late winter is the time to be looking for cold conditions. We've had a cold snap through this December. It's not going to be a particularly mild month by any means. I think we'll still have waxing and waning mild and cold conditions as we go into January as well. But something could well happen as we get through to February. That was the forecast from Gaz Weatherford, so I think it's still there within the models that February is the one. If we're going to get a cold month, significant cold month, February is the one to be watching out for to deliver that. It's by no means guaranteed, but it'll happen. But that's the one really that holds the interest. So let's just wait and see how things develop as we go through into the late winter period, and then probably for March it turns a bit milder. But let's wait and see what happens. Talking of March, I'll be coming back later on this afternoon with the first update for spring, so come back for that. But that's all for now, and thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.